The divergence between the rapid accumulation of wealth for a select minority and the persistent financial stagnation of the global majority follows a specific pattern. Data from the World Inequality Report reveals the scale of this divide. The top 10% of the global population owns 75% of all personal wealth. At the same time, the bottom 50% of the population holds only 2% of that total. These statistics diverge from standard assumptions of meritocracy, where financial outcomes are expected to correlate directly with labor output and individual effort. This concentration of capital functions as a system of architecture, a framework of legal and financial mechanisms designed to decouple earning potential from linear time constraints. Let's examine two economic systems. Left, linear wage architecture. It relies on continuous physical input, tying income directly to time and labor. Right, structural wealth architecture. It utilizes capital to compound autonomously, operating independently of the creator's physical lifespan or direct labor input. We will examine these structures as an objective engineering problem, focusing on the systemic design that dictates these disparate outcomes. Understanding extreme wealth requires shifting the focus from individual labor to the design of the systems themselves. The majority of households operate within a linear execution model, the trade of limited physical time for currency. In this model, labor enters the system and is converted into gross income. This input is immediately subjected to the highest marginal taxation rates, which significantly reduce the volume of capital available for the next phase. The remaining capital is typically placed into low-yield notes, such as basic cash savings accounts. This creates a fragile environment where static savings are vulnerable to external macroeconomic shocks and currency devaluation. Between 2021 and 2024, wage earners in Laos experienced the effects of this vulnerability, as a 140% currency depreciation destroyed the purchasing power of their labor-based savings. Regional elites avoid this localized exposure by moving capital across borders, utilizing Singaporean family offices and hard asset collateralization to insulate their assets from domestic failures. The linear system remains mathematically fragile. If the physical input of labor stops, the system fails, and external forces like inflation actively erode any stored value. The model utilized by the select minority functions through a cyclical compounding architecture. The acquisition phase involves deploying capital to secure appreciating income-producing assets, such as private business equity or commercial real estate. To fund consumption, these owners avoid selling their assets, as a sale would trigger capital gains taxes. Instead, they borrow against the underlying equity. Since global tax codes classify loan proceeds as debt rather than income, this liquidity bypasses taxation. This cycle is maintained until the generational transfer phase, where assets are passed to heirs. Section 1014 of the U.S. Internal Revenue Code provides a step up in basis, resetting the asset's value to its current market price for tax purposes. This legal mechanism erases decades of accumulated capital gains. Heirs can then liquidate a portion of the assets tax-free to repay the loans and restart the compounding loop. The buy-borrow-die loop is an engineered solution to capital erosion, designed to preserve and expand wealth across generations. Protecting this compounding loop from liability and creditors requires a layer of institutional-grade defensive architecture. At the apex sits a master trust. This structure severs the assets from the individual's personal name, shielding the capital from lawsuits and professional liabilities. From this trust, Wyoming LLCs branch off to isolate individual assets. This structural separation ensures that a failure in one specific investment cannot penetrate the wider portfolio. This strategy evolved through the survival tactics of legacy financial dynasties like the Rockefellers, who refined the use of generation-skipping trusts and internal family banks. Managing such a complex ecosystem requires the specialized infrastructure of a family office, which provides the technical expertise to maintain these legal shields. One such tool is private placement life insurance. This functions as a tax-advantaged wrapper for high-yield alternative assets. Gains compound tax-free within this insurance envelope. Owners then borrow against the policy's cash value, accessing capital without triggering income taxes. These tools elevate wealth into an institutional fortress, minimizing the drag coefficient on capital accumulation. Precise mathematical models govern how this system manages volatility and risk. This can be mapped through Nassim Taleb's Barbell Strategy, a model designed to create anti-fragile portfolios. On the left side, 85 to 90% of capital is placed in hyper-safe, inflation-protected, income-generating assets to ensure survival. The remaining 10 to 15% is placed on the extreme right, in highly speculative, asymmetric bets with mathematically unlimited upside. Most households are forced by necessity into the middle of this barbell, holding moderate-risk assets that offer neither the guarantee of survival nor the potential for exponential growth. Even with these structures, the system remains vulnerable to behavioral errors and overconfidence. If the cost of borrowing exceeds asset appreciation during a market drawdown, the resulting margin calls can lead to liquidations and the failure of the compounding loop. Wealth architecture focuses on mathematically isolating the downside while keeping the upside uncapped, allowing the system to benefit from market volatility. The outcomes of these two systems follow a predictable trajectory over a generational timeline. Thomas Piketty's thesis identifies the mechanism. The return on capital consistently exceeds the rate of economic growth. Capital compounds faster than wages can grow. This stack represents the path from linear labor to structural wealth. The lower layers of survival and stability are heavily congested, while the upper tiers of compounding provide exponential advantages. Moving into these upper tiers depends on the bridge of social capital. Raj Chetty's research indicates that high net worth networks provide the specific introductions to off-market capital and partnerships that individuals operating in isolation cannot access. Public and legislative efforts are now targeting the loopholes that enable these elite structures. Proposed legislation, like the PPLI Abuse Act led by Senator Ron Wyden, seeks to remove the tax-exempt status of insurance wrappers used by the ultra-wealthy. Senate Finance Committee investigations are currently analyzing these mechanisms, focusing on tools utilized exclusively by the top 0.